A do-or-die sacrifice bunt to help lead to a Cardinal walk-off win? Did I just get transported back to Whitey Ball? Coming up on B Schaeffer Daily. What's going on, everybody, and welcome in to this edition of B Schaeffer Daily. Brenden Schaeffer here with you, evening hours of Tuesday, August 29th, 2023. How about that? Your St. Louis Cardinals back in the win column at long last, and the way they did it on Tuesday night in extra innings with a walk-off against Josh Hader. And that's not all. It's like a, but wait, there's more moment for the St. Louis Cardinals, because those old school Cardinal fans, the Whitey Ball fans, the fans that say, Cardinals, can you find any other way to score runs besides the long ball? Those which have come few and far between for the Cardinals of late. Those fans are rejoicing on Tuesday night because of what Richie Palacios did with a do-or-die sacrifice bunt to put the Cardinals in prime position to walk things off against the Padres closer in the bottom of the 10th inning. Cardinals win 6-5 over San Diego on Tuesday. Coming up tonight on B Schaeffer Daily, we will talk about the events of those extra innings and how the Cardinals got there in the first place with some really quality relief pitching from JoJo Romero, who with the changeup looks absolutely filthy right now for the Cardinals. One of the few bright spots that we have seen down the stretch for this team as the Cardinals are looking for ways to build that roster up for 2024. They're trying to essentially audition different guys for different various roles. And I feel pretty good about this because I think I could go back a number of weeks, maybe even a month and a half or so ago, talking about, well, I don't really know what the Cardinal bullpen is going to look like next year, but JoJo Romero is going to be in it. Yeah, I've had that take for a little while this summer, and it's looking pretty prescient. At this point, Romero with a clean 9th and a clean 10th inning tonight for the Cardinals. 2 innings of scoreless baseball. He finishes with 3 Ks on the game. Has that ERA down to 3.34, and the guy who couldn't get a decision to his MLB ledger there for a long while is now 4-1 on the season. Another win for JoJo Romero. So we'll talk a little bit about JoJo tonight. We'll talk about the Richie Palacios bunt and Tommy Edman against a left-handed pitcher. Is there anything more automatic than that? Even if that lefty is Josh Hader, apparently it still applies. So Ollie Marmol with a little bit of a checkmate situation, playing the chess match there in the 10th, and Ollie comes out on top, pulling the right strings to get the Cardinals that W. We'll talk about the start by Zach Thompson. Could have been more efficient for sure, but a big game for Cardinal catcher Willson Contreras with a couple of home runs in this game to help pace the Cardinal offense. So we'll break down to 6-5 win. That'll be in this first video here on YouTube. If you're listening on YouTube, you'll have to click later on in the channel. We're going to post the video of the second half of the podcast on Wednesday morning as we get into a little bit of speculation after what the Los Angeles Angels did earlier today, Tuesday, basically waiving a handful of players. They're going to release these guys after putting them on waivers if they don't stick with other teams. A pure salary dump by Artie Moreno, who is down bad as the Los Angeles Angels owner in the wake of, well, the recent slump by the team, the injuries to Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani. Yeah, they're basically packing it in for the year, which puts a number of guys on the free agent radar. Yankees doing the same with one prominent former Cardinal. We'll talk about one name in particular that I wonder would the Cardinals be interested in for a team that's looking for pitching for next year. Could this be maybe a way in with one Lucas Giolito? We'll talk about that on tonight's B Schaeffer Daily. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, great news. You don't have to do anything. The entire episode will be in one chunk, but for YouTube, try to split them into separate videos so that people know what they're watching when they get into it. But this is going to be a recap of the game to begin, so let's talk about it. Cardinals win 6-5. We finally see a little bit of life from the offense, although it takes Willson Contreras mashing a pair of home runs. It takes 10 innings in order to get that 6th run that gets the Cardinals the W on the night. But certainly an attitude of all's well that ends well. After 4 games in a stretch where the Cardinals had compiled just a total of 4 runs, they score 6 in this one. Courtesy again of Willson Contreras, who got things going in both the 6th and 8th innings with long balls, making a visit to Freeze's lawn there in the 8th to tie the game. It was 5-3. Contreras making it 5-5. The start of the game a little bit rocky tonight for Cardinal starter left-hander Zach Thompson, who only got through 4 innings in this one, throwing 91 pitches. The efficiency wasn't a hallmark of his game. We have seen largely Zach Thompson be better in this area at the big league level this year when it comes to walks. It's something that really had plagued him in the minors. We spent some time on B Shafe Daily recently talking about the ABS system that is implemented at AAA this year and how the top of the strike zone has been a real challenge for the guys, at least on the Cardinals, who have talked about pitching between AAA and back to the big leagues and kind of bouncing back and forth. It's a stark difference down there in AAA with the top of the zone basically just being non-existent. Anytime you're trying to dot the upper part of the strike zone, it's just been a ball above the zone down there, more of a vertical zone when you get to the big leagues and what the umpires tend to call there. So maybe that's been part of it for Zach Thompson, but largely, as I've mentioned, we've seen a lot of the Cardinals that have come up do a little bit better with the bases on balls at the big league level. Was not the case tonight for Zach Thompson, who walked 4, had 3 strikeouts in 4 innings of work, but managed to kind of mitigate some of the damage. 5 hits, 3 runs in total, 2 of them earned. So Zach Thompson now with a 3.92 ERA at the big league level so far this season. Error on Contreras with an errant throw, but not really the end of the world. Just, he's got to make, I think, more of an impression if he wants to really cement himself as a guy under consideration for next year's roster. But this was really, pardon me, let me slow down. For next year's starting 5 roster, I think he could certainly be a guy that could shift back to the bullpen. He's got a lot of arm talent, and I could see a world in which maybe it's Zach Thompson competing for a starting role in spring. But if that doesn't pan out, rather than send him down to Memphis to stretch him out, maybe they make the decision to say, hey, the lefties in the bullpen next year are perhaps going to be JoJo Romero and Zach Thompson. Like, that's a way they could go. Thompson began this season in that role. We'll kind of wait and see. Another guy, though, that can honestly have an impact on that and has looked pretty good since the Cardinals picked him up, kind of the unsung part of that trade of Jordan Montgomery and Chris Stratton to the Texas Rangers, knowing that Tekoa Roby, the high-profile pitching prospect he was the guy with the shoulder issue but has recently returned and had 6 Ks in 3 innings with his debut in Springfield, and then Thomas Saggese, the infielder, who is just absolutely wrecking Double-A pitching for the Springfield Cardinals. Both those guys come over in the deal with the Rangers. John King, the left-handed reliever, was the one guy that immediately vaulted to the big league roster after that deal was made, and he's actually quietly done a pretty nice job since joining the Cardinals this season. ERA with Texas was 5.79. With the Cardinals, though, it's 1.04. He's got 9 appearances now, 8 2/3 innings, allowing 7 hits and just 1 run on a solo home run, and only 1 walk in that frame as well. 4 strikeouts in 8 2/3 innings, not exactly a prominent strikeout rate for a guy, but at the same time, I feel like John King could be in the mix for that maybe second or third lefty spot in the rotation, the bullpen next year. If you can't tell, I'm still a little bit sleep deprived, but I'm going to try to grind my way through this. But if you cannot tell, yeah, infants, they don't sleep, apparently. I know I've mentioned that on the show previously, but it still remains true. For you parents or would-be parents out there, just keep that in mind. Anyhow, John King doing a nice job is what I wanted to say. Zach Thompson doing a fine enough job, but I think you don't necessarily pencil him into a rotation spot. We've talked about the Cardinals needing 3 outside starters. I think that's true regardless of how Thompson finishes up in 2023, but you can definitely keep him in that competition for next year's kind of number 6 spot. If you consider 3 outside sources, Michaelis plus Matz, those are your 5. One of them gets hurt. The Cardinals are going to need more than just the 5. So that's where Zach Thompson, maybe Dakota Hudson, if he's still with the organization, maybe Drew Rom, Matthew Liberatore certainly would be in that conversation to grind it out to see if one of those guys could be almost the ace of Memphis and then therefore get vaulted to St. Louis when, I'm not even going to say if, but when the Cardinals are in need of a second starter, or a 6th starter, I should say, because that's just the way it goes in baseball. Starting pitchers get hurt. So the Cardinals need depth for next year. We'll see if Zach Thompson is a part of that, but definitely need to be more efficient than he was tonight on 91 pitches to get through 4. One other pitcher I want to make mention of that appeared in the game tonight for the Cardinals is Casey Lawrence, the veteran who has sort of been in the mop-up duty, just logging a bunch of innings any given time that he's available, and the Cardinals starter that day wasn't able to go very deep. It's been Casey Lawrence territory largely for the Cardinals, and I've gotten a lot of comments and questions about, like, why are the Cardinals devoting so much real estate within these games to Casey Lawrence, who presumably will not be part of next year's team, right? Like, he's a veteran in his early to mid-30s, is kind of a journeyman guy, has a 4.97 ERA after today's appearance, gave up a run in the 6th, a run in the 8th, goes 3 2/3, just chewing up innings. That's kind of the name of the game for a guy like Casey Lawrence. And the question would be, could the Cardinals be using that platform to showcase potentially some younger arms that they could learn about more for next year's team. And it sounds great in theory, but I really do want to stress that at this point in the season, the Cardinals are at a place where they just got to get through it, and they just got to try to finish out these games, and you need to throw 9 innings. And Casey Lawrence, for better or worse or indifferent, has been able to throw 3 to 4 to 5 innings in a relief role and just be the guy to take the ball and go till your arm falls off. Like, that's kind of where the Cardinals are. And then this game kind of turns in their favor where they're able to say, all right, as we get into these late innings, it's still a close game. And so they bring in John King for the final out of that 8th inning, which then leads to the home run in the bottom of the 8th where the Cardinals have suddenly tied the game. That makes it JoJo Romero territory, and the rest is history. Just kind of interesting to see the run that Casey Lawrence is getting right now. It may not be glamorous, it may not be sexy, but I do want to caution Cardinals fans who are going, why are they spending so much time on this guy? It's a valuable role to the team. It's similar to what Andrew Suarez is doing. We saw Jacob Barnes take the ball for an extended period. Like, that's kind of where they're at right now. This was the plan. You know, they had signed these guys to minor league contracts leading up to the trade deadline, knowing, hey, there's going to come a moment in this season where we are going to have to restock the roster. And in theory, it would be great if you could devote a lot of that energy to young guys and emerging talents, but sometimes you just need your vegetables. And I feel like these guys in the bullpen, the mechanics of getting through a major league season when you're a team that's as downtrodden as the Cardinals are in 2023, sometimes you just need those vegetable relievers that can, like, they're playing for something. You don't think those guys are trying to do the best they can to extend their big league careers, get a look on a roster for next year, maybe right here in St. Louis if they perform adequately enough. Like, a lot of those things are considerations. So it works out for everybody involved. And you look at the kind of quote unquote young guys, like, that's always the trope is, oh, why don't the Cardinals let the kids play? When you look on the pitching side, there aren't any. Like, the guys that you would be clamoring for, like Guillermo Zuniga, okay, you go for that, and then he's hurt, and it's just been kind of up and down for him. The consistency hasn't been there. Cardinals need guys that they can flat rely upon, even if that doesn't mean rely upon to throw up a bunch of zeros. If you give up 4 or 5 runs, but you also throw 4 or 5 innings, you're kind of the guy. But as we've seen, like when Wainwright was really struggling, you can't just expect a guy that's going to be able to go 4 innings if he can only go 1, if he can only record 3 outs. There is a skill to just being able to wear it sometimes, and the Cardinals have some guys in their bullpen that if it's going wrong on a given day, they're going to be able to wear it. But to Casey Lawrence's credit, he pitched well enough over 3 2/3 innings today to keep the Cardinals within striking distance. And then to the credit of Willson Contreras, he struck. So the Cardinals were able to find a win. Like, this is the gritty type of win that I feel like fans probably find refreshing right now because it's been very rare. It's been few and far between with the way Cardinal games have played out recently. Does it mean anything? No. In the long run, it doesn't really mean anything for the standings or for much of anything at all other than learning about these individual players. But I do think there is value to just a group of guys getting back into the rhythm of what it feels like to win baseball games, because they're not going to get to play in October this year. So they have to make these games count as much as they possibly can. It's not life or death, because if they lose a bunch of games, they get a little bit of a better chance in the draft lottery. That right now they're top 5 pick if the lottery doesn't screw them. So that's exciting to see what Randy Flores could do with that. But this is still a group of players that, hey, if you want to see a quick turnaround in 2024, there's going to have to be a significant overhaul on the roster. Yeah, but there's also going to be a lot of guys that do return, and those guys getting into the habit of playing winning baseball certainly cannot hurt. One guy that's really helped them do that, well, I guess Willson Contreras applies because the couple of home runs that he hit today were huge. And every time we kind of bring up Contreras right now, it feels like it's in passing with regard to the conversation that will take place in the offseason about whether or not this guy is the everyday catcher next year, or is he more of a reserve catcher who DHs a lot? Do they even consider having him play some outfield? I think with how many crowded outfielders you have on this roster already, you can't consider that. You'd have to move guys off the roster before even thinking that way. But there is going to eventually be, I think, a reckoning where the Cardinals have to go, what do we want to do? And if they kind of can just accept Contreras for what he is as a catcher, which is, he's got his flaws and he's going to be overly eager at times. He'll make some throwing errors out of aggression. He'll do some things that kind of tick you off. But he's also a passionate player who wants to be great. Like, it's not for a lack of desire or effort from Willson Contreras that, some of these intangible and little things don't kind of go his direction. from behind the plate. He wants it. The Cardinals just kind of have to decide, I think, how patient they want to be with a veteran player who defensively kind of feels like you can always grow and get better, right? But he kind of is what he is at this point based on the fact that he's been in the league for a long time, and there's sort of a book on what you can expect from Willson. But you know what else you can expect from Willson Contreras is offense. Got the OPS up to 784 for the season. It wouldn't shock me to see him get on a little bit of a roll and finish at an 800 OPS this year, which would be, right about in line with what he has been for his career. So good to see Willson Contreras, I believe, up to 15 home runs now. Cardinals don't win this game tonight without him, so that definitely bears mentioning. They also don't win this game tonight without JoJo Romero, who is locked into this bullpen for next year, if anybody is. Like, when it comes to guys like Giovanni Gallegos, I don't know if he's going to be on the team next year. If the Cardinals look at it and say he may just be a non-tender candidate, maybe he's a guy that we can try and trade because other teams are going to be compelled to pay him as a back-end reliever. His salary is going to start to climb up a little bit. Largely, he's been reliable for the Cardinals this year, but you're seeing again kind of creep into his game recently, some of those struggles. And when the guy gives up one home run, you can darn well expect he's going to give up a second one. That has been the story of his season. I believe now it's been 5 different games in the season. I want to go back and make sure I check this and get this right. It looks like 5 different games in which he's given up a homer. In 4 of the 5, he's given up a second homer. And that occurred earlier over the weekend against the Philadelphia Phillies in that 12-1 beatdown, where he recorded just 1 out, gave up 4 earned runs, walked a guy, gave up 2 bombs, the whole bit. I don't know exactly what Gio's role is going to be next year if he has one. I like Giovanni Gallegos. I'm just trying to think from a business standpoint how the Cardinals are going to handle it. Ryan Helsley, a lot of rumors flying around about, whether he's dissatisfied. He kind of shot those down on Twitter. But could he be a trade candidate in the offseason if the Cardinals decide, to kind of test the waters on that, and another team says, yeah, we'll take 101 out of our bullpen, 103 out of our bullpen. That sounds good to us. Maybe that's something that would take place. Ryan Helsley, performance-wise, I think certainly you'd put him right back into the Cardinal bullpen and in the 8th or 9th inning toward the back end of the game. But also you do have to consider what's the reliability of his ability to be on the field, to be available. That's something that I think the Cardinals do think about. I tend to think that's not really a fair way to characterize Ryan Helsley because, gosh, how many pitchers get hurt? A lot of them do. And how many of them throw 103? Not many of them do. So, and there's often a kind of a crossover there with guys that have that elite stuff, but they also have to be careful to figure out the way they manage their arm. Helsley purportedly kind of moving back toward a return to the Cardinals. We'll see. Had the rehab shut down for a time there. I think he's trying to ramp it back up, so we'll see what that looks like. But is Helsley a guarantee to be on the team next year? I don't know. I think I would have him there, but if they find a suitable trade offer, then maybe they take it. JoJo Romero is going to be on this team next year. I feel 100% confident in that. He's just been exactly what the Cardinals have needed down this stretch, and he's proven himself. Like, that's a great example of a guy who is taking the opportunity given to him. When Jordan Hicks goes and Ryan Helsley's hurt, it's kind of one of those deals where, well, Gallegos hasn't ever really fared too well in the 9th. We prefer him in the 8th or the 7th. And JoJo, it's going to be you. Let's see what you got. And he's got it. Like, he looks like a closer on the mound. You know how some guys have the different mannerisms, and they were talking on the broadcast tonight about him looking like Al Raboski just needs the Fu Manchu, and he's kind of already got the mustache going. Honestly, JoJo Romero, man, I think he's got the chops to be a late-inning lefty for the Cardinals next year. I'm not saying he's going to be your closer necessarily because you might have some other competition for that role, but he's certainly taken it and run with it, and that is absolutely, like, not an ego thing, but it's a mentality thing, and JoJo has it. And he's kind of a guy that when it doesn't go his way, I feel like he just lets it like water off a duck's back. It just doesn't really affect him. JoJo Romero has the mentality to be a late-inning dude for the Cardinals. I'm ready to call it. They won the Edmundo Sosa trade. Like, there's no doubt. Getting JoJo Romero back for Edmundo Sosa. At the time, I said, great. I don't know about this JoJo Romero. I've heard of him, but I don't really think he's necessarily a guy that I project for a significant future for the Cardinals, but neither is Edmundo Sosa, and it was time to just clear him out. JoJo is that guy, though. Like, I'm committed to that. I'm fully on board with the job that he's done. He's really, really impressed me. And I feel like a lot of Cardinals fans, he's impressed as well with the job that he's done. So that's the guy that I just wanted to, I mean, to have that trait where in the Manfred Mann era, when you go into extra innings and there's a guy on second, you got to figure out a way to not let him move. JoJo's got that. And I've asked him about it before. Like, do you relish that opportunity? He's like, yeah, man, I like to pitch under the pressure. He doesn't really think about it that much. So, like, okay, there's a guy on second base. Let's just go out there and do my thing. And tonight, had the strikeout work, and the changeup is just gross. Even like the fastball, 96, 97, like he can pump it up even beyond that. Getting location to be perfect. I mean, he's been really, really good just with what he's been able to do and kind of mixing and matching against certain hitters. Really impressive tonight. Again, the Cardinals did not win without the contributions from JoJo Romero. But let's talk about that bottom of the 10th inning, huh? If you're an old school Cardinals fan, if you're a whitey ball kind of Cardinal fan, you really liked what you saw from Richie Palacios, who, look, it's one of those deals where with the Manfred man, there are ways to manage it and strategize it, and sometimes the best manager can find a way to win a game by kind of deploying the pieces the way that he needs to in those innings. The way that I look at it is in the top of the 10th inning, if you're on the road, you're not doing the sacrifice bunt to try to scratch across one run because your assumption has to be with the other team also starting off with a man in scoring position in the bottom half of the 10th inning, they have just as good of an opportunity to get that guy across home plate, and then we can just keep doing this forever. Everybody scores 1 run per inning if you play small ball as the road team. As the road team, I don't think you bunt. I think you have to swing for the fences. You have to try for a multi-run inning. You need that crooked number because it just puts a lot of the pressure on the home team to not only score that first guy from second base that they get for free, but to have the line moving and commit to actually a rally that would need to take place. If you're the home team, though, absolutely you bunt. Like, largely, I think the Cardinal fans talk about the bunt all the time like it's this obsession. I think you guys need to take a chill pill sometimes. Like, it's a little bit much. I get it. You want to see some situational hitting and some situational baseball, and you're largely correct. And it would be nice if the Cardinals didn't just need a solo home run every now and again, and that was all they did for a week. I totally agree with you guys. Sometimes, though, it's not the time to bunt, and a lot of times people are going, yeah, you should just always bunt. Well, okay. In this case, though, I loved it. Very strange to see it with 2 strikes, and, like, not really, it just kind of came out of nowhere for me to think, oh, he's really going to do this with 2 strikes. Laid it down perfectly. I like Richie Palacios' game, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself and put the cart before the horse because we've seen players like him, like an Oscar Mercado, who kind of had that little skill set that he could get on base in theory. He could play a good defense for you in theory. He could do some of the little things right in theory. Palacios, though, so far is like doing them. You know, Mercado was kind of a flash in the pan where we liked the energy, but then it just kind of faded, and then you started to see some issues creep in where defensively, you know, he had the Canseco thing happen, the ball at the wall where he knocks it over the fence for a home run, and love Oscar Mercado, but like his star kind of faded out right after a few weeks. Palacios, the same thing could happen. It's possible. But I think I trust his on-base skills, and I trust I don't know. There's something about him. I think he's a great 5th outfielder in 2024. I don't think he should be in your starting lineup on day one, barring a bunch of injuries. I don't even really think it's fair to say he's your 4th outfielder in an ideal world because I'm looking at this roster right now going, Nootbaar's in your lineup, Walker's in your lineup. They got to figure out what they're going to do with O'Neill and Carlson. Both could be traded. I'm telling you right now, both could be gone from next year's team, and they could go out and maybe sign somebody to be an everyday left fielder and hit with a little bit more power, or be an everyday center fielder and do the same thing. Maybe they support Tommy Edman to be the everyday center fielder. I'll talk about in the offseason why I don't think that's a great idea. I think there's a better role for him, and I've even mentioned it already on B-Shape Daily within the last couple of days. But my point is there's a lot of moving parts that could happen with this outfield, and I haven't even said Alec Burleson's name yet. And the Cardinals, I think they're committed to him, but we'll kind of see if the performance doesn't turn. Like, he's a guy that it would be very valuable to see him play every day the rest of the season, just to kind of get a feel for what you can grow to expect. Just get him more experience so that you're not a year or two down the road going, well, he's a young guy, we just haven't seen enough of him, and he's 26, and it's not really the same. Go ahead and play him because right now he's one of the guys that I think you do need to learn about. It's tough to make a determination about a guy over a half a season of work, but maybe that's where the Cardinals end up deciding kind of how they want to structure their outfield next year. But Palacios, I think, is a guy that could fit into that mix on the end of your bench and be a spark plug kind of player. He could fit nicely into that niche. But how about the bunt tonight? You have the runner on second base to start the inning. You lay down the perfect bunt. And the Mason Wynn being the base runner made you feel really good, too, about going into that situation, just knowing the speed that you had on the bases if you needed to employ it in any way. They get Mason Wynn to third. The Padres decide to walk Paul Goldschmidt at that point. And some Cardinals fans say, that's great. Goldschmidt hasn't been the most clutch hitter of late, which I would say, whatever. I'd still say you want Goldschmidt to be batting there in that spot. But it is a lefty, so there's no way they were going to let it happen. And so it's like, hey, we can get to a lefty-lefty situation where you're facing Nolan Gorman, a chance for a double play to end the inning. Heck yeah, that's what the Padres were thinking. Ollie Marmol had different ideas, though. He goes for the bold move pulling Tommy Edman off the bench, taking the bat out of Gorman's hand, and it works. Tommy Edman with the walk-off base hit would have been a Tommy two bags all day long because it was in the left field gap. However, they only needed the single, and so it goes as a walk-off hit. But how about that? Tommy Edman coming through against Josh Hader, of all people. Really impressive to see that. Tommy Edman against lefties every day, man. You play him every day in that situation. He's your leadoff man every day. I have no issue with it. He's amazing. Tommy Edman might need to consider abandoning switch hitting, though, because that's how good he's been from the right side of the plate. And overall, the numbers, I wonder if that's a consideration. If the Cardinals look at Tommy Edman and go, hey, 2024, going into 2024, this is a conversation for October or November after the season, where you look at it and say, Tommy, we love what you did in center field this year. I know you came up mostly an infielder and you are a very fine shortstop. We've got this kid Mason Wynn that we're really hoping pans out there. So we're looking at going into 2024 with Mason as our guy to begin at shortstop. You can obviously spell him there because we know you have that skill set. But we want to let you take this center field job and run with it if you would consider working all offseason to become a right-handed only hitter. Would that be something that you think you'd be interested in? And I don't know how realistic this type of conversation is because as fans, as media, as outsiders, we can sit there on our bar stool and have a beer in our hand and we can go, you know what would be cool? You know what the Cardinals should do? And those are the kind of conversations we all love. But I think sometimes we mistake those kind of conversations for the actual dialogue that happens for teams. And I don't know if it's exactly the same. I don't know how realistic it is for the Cardinals to approach Tommy Edman. It's not an ultimatum, but it's hey, we would really want to see you consider this. Is that how the Cardinals even feel? I'm not saying that it is. I'm just thinking out loud a little bit here and playing in a very big speculative playground of if the Cardinals could see Tommy Edman as an everyday center fielder defensively, the only thing that I would view as holding him back would be his performance against right-handed pitching. Because against lefties, there's no doubt about what Tommy Edman does. There never really has been. He's been fantastic. He's even got power from the right side when he faces left-handed pitchers, but it's one of those things that lefties aren't what you see most of the time, and so how often are you able to take advantage of that? Tommy this year with a 766 OPS against lefties, which is a little bit down, I think, from what it was last year, but still, the 467 slug is what really stands out. The dude has power. I believe now he's got 6 homers against lefties, 6 against righties on the season, despite more than double the plate appearances against right-handed pitching as compared to lefties. He's been fantastic from the left side largely throughout his career. He's not a leadoff guy. His on-base percentage is not a skill that he has. Even against lefties, to be honest with you, I'm looking at it now. He's got a 299 on base against lefties. It's 295 against right. The major difference is a slight boost to his average, at least this year, and a substantial boost, nearly 100 points, to his slugging percentage against left-handed pitching. So is that something that the Cardinals look at and go, what if we could manifest more of that from Tommy Edman if he just always batted from the right side and we asked him if he would do it? And, I don't know. That feels like a delicate conversation for a guy who sees himself as a switch hitter. But if you look at the numbers, I gave them for his season, but for his career, it's even more stark. An 815 OPS against lefties in 580 PAs, 720 PAs against right-handed pitching, PAs is being plate appearances, and a 696 OPS. So it's 120 points different for his career. Would it be something the Cardinals would look at? Because if he can do it defensively, which I believe he can, I know the arm's a little bit lackluster, but I don't mind. I'd rather have range in center field. The arm just doesn't come into play as often as range will, and as athleticism will, and he can dive around and make catches like anybody can, with the best of them, I should say. And so I would just wonder if that would be something the Cardinals would look at and say, man, if we had the Tommy Edman version from the right side that we often see, and he can OPS 750 overall by going 800 against lefties and even 725 or 730 against righties by batting right on right, that would be really interesting. We know we've seen Tommy Edman dabble in the right on right, not as much recently, I don't think, but it's against certain pitchers with certain breaking balls that he does it. But what if he decided I'm going to do it full time? That would be maybe a change that could be made over an offseason. Again, highly speculative, probably won't happen, but something I wanted to talk about. Also, as I'm looking at the splits here on the platoon stuff for Tommy Edman for his career, 79 stolen bases against right-handed pitching, 15 caught stealing. If this is accurate on Baseball Reference, he's never been caught stealing against a left-handed pitcher. There's no way that's right. I don't know if that's right. Maybe it is. Yeah, that's not right. I don't know what's going on with the Baseball Reference page here because it says versus right-handed starter, he's been caught 14 times. First left-handed starter, he's been caught once. I'm going to say that Baseball Reference doesn't necessarily track the stolen base situation by handedness. I don't know. I'm sorry I even included this, but sometimes you get my inner musings, and this was an example of that. Nevertheless, I was talking about the outfield situation in Richie Palacios is mostly what I was doing, and then kind of getting into Tommy Edman to say that, damn, he looks good against left-handed pitcher again, even the best lefty in the game who's got an ERA of like .79 this year in Josh Hader. So good for Tommy Edman. If he could just be that league average offensive player against the right side and above league average against the left side pitchers, then he would be a center fielder that you would have total confidence in. But I worry about offensively if you have some holes in other spots. Like Mason Wynn's going to be your shortstop. He's hitting 170 as of right now. Is it going to be that for his career? No. But I also think to expect Mason Wynn to be more than a 9 or 8 hitter in 2024 is premature. There's going to be a learning curve there. So you're already kind of assuming, like if you can get Mason Wynn to league average to a 100 OPS plus in 2024, you smash that button and take it. Because it's not easy to do for a young player that's just going to be, kind of integrating himself at the big league level. I think he can do it, but I'm not saying it's a given. If you could accept that and smash that button, I think you would. And then you look at your areas where you're robust offensively, first and third. Yeah, those guys are going to be great. Arenado and Goldschmidt, but they're not going to be as great as they were in 2022. They may be more like what they've been in 2023. And so that's a little bit of a lower ceiling for your offense in general. Gorman, Donovan, Nootbaar, like those guys you feel good about, but none of them, well, Gorman could be that guy, and I think Brenden Donovan and Nootbaar could be as well. But you've got like a bunch of really, really goods, and there's no more MVP candidates necessarily unless we see Goldie or Arenado kind of lock that back in. I don't necessarily know that you have the MVP candidate. Gorman, I don't think has been consistent enough to where I'm going to put him into that category yet. So you're just kind of looking at that lineup going, how many spots do you really want to say we're going to accept being below league average offensively or right at league average offensively? Outfield just doesn't feel like one where you can do that for me in the modern game. And that's kind of what you'd be doing with Tommy Edman. So I guess I said I would talk about it in a future podcast. I ended up talking about it today a little bit more. It'll be a topic that we discuss a lot in the offseason because I'm a huge believer in Tommy Edman. I just think how are you going to deploy him specifically to be effective is a question that I still have for 2024 and the way the roster shakes out. But if you had him as like the backup to Wynn at shortstop where he plays short, once every couple of weeks whenever Wynn needs a break, or if Wynn's offense is scuffling, then, he does it more often. And then he's a center fielder when he needs to be backing up as needed. And Brenden Donovan slides into left field sometimes as needed. He plays second baseman when Gorman DHs. And that's the way I could see it working next year. But there's still some things that need to be ironed out with that. But that's kind of the way I look at this win for the Cardinals, 6-5. Nicely done in 10 innings. It's nice to be able to have that for Cardinals fans, I think, every once in a while. But let's go ahead and get into the Lucas Giolito conversation because this was really interesting from earlier Tuesday